Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is the pre-show, the Westworld pre-show for episode 5 of season 2 of Westworld. I've got two fantastic guests with me today. You probably know them both already, but I'll give them both a chance to introduce themselves. First of all, Hax Dogma. Hax, do you want to just say hi?
Hey everybody, Hax Dogma here. I run a YouTube channel doing 2 videos a week about Westworld. Essentially, that's the channel, and if you like theories and explained videos, be sure to stop by.
Fantastic. And my other guest is the legendary Justin Thomas. Justin, do you want to say hi?
What's up, everybody? Happy to be back talking about some Westworld and looking forward to Shogun World tonight. If you have any questions, make sure to put them in the chat.
Absolutely. As always, we're going to be, we'll try and respond to as many of the questions as we can that are in the chat, particularly, obviously, any super chats. We'll come to them straight away. And Elisa Mutlu, I saw you put a super chat in early, $10. Thank you so much. We'll get to that when we get to that bit of the conversation, if that's all right. Guys, if you don't know me, I am Robert. This is my channel, In Deep Geek. I cover both Westworld and Game of Thrones. So if you're into Game of Thrones, you come here for Westworld, but you're into Game of Thrones, please do go and check out some of my Game of Thrones videos as well. I keep doing them at least one video, sometimes even 2 videos on Game of Thrones a week at the moment, even through Westworld. But let's get right into it. So we're going to do this roughly in 2 halves. We're going to do the first half of this. We're going to be looking back to episode 4, which was quite a big reveal episode. There was lots of new information going on, so I think there's a lot to discuss there. And then the second half, we're going to look forward to episode 5. As Justin said, we're going to see Shogun World, which is really exciting. It's something we've been looking forward to ever since that first trailer. So we'll come on to that in the second half. But first half, let's just make sure we're all on the same page, understanding exactly what happened last episode, just trying to unpick it a little bit, dig it underneath what we saw to try and understand the implications of it. And let's start out, because it mainly was about the Man in Black, William and Bernard. So let's start with the what was the way they started it, which was the Delos experiment, let's call it. So we got James Delos there in that circular room, sort of being brought back to life again and again and again. So Hax, do you want to start? Just what are your thoughts on what was going on there? What did we actually learn from what was happening there?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, what we learned from that is that William's master plan and the research group is pushing for immortality. You know, it starts off with a younger William learning that, you know, some advances, like they need to have that constant of, you know, before the operation and after the operation, kind of that same repetitive speech to establish a baseline. So even from the beginning, they had some kind of understanding of what they were doing. Then fast forward, all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, fast forward 25 years or 30 years, and William no longer shares that aesthetic. He no longer believes that humans are meant to live forever. But through this, it's kind of like the tortured William learning about himself and the background of James Delos being developed. You know, really the background of this corporate research group being developed. And honestly, the scenes with James Delos were probably my favorite scenes in this entire series so far.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the in terms of the direction, there were so many layers there to that scene, and this was just to take a few examples. You get the record, so you get like the broken record going round and round and round. You got the goldfish bowl, the symbolism there of not just the goldfish who's forgetting what's happening again and again and again, but being stuck within the goldfish bowl. The revolutions on the bike, the imagery that we got again and again and again was really clear of this stop and start, restart, going again, of trying to bring back James Delos. Justin, how about you? What did you take from that kind of segment?
Yeah, I'm completely in line with Hax on this one. Those are my favorite scenes of the series, even not just the whole series, you know, as a whole. That what we got there, we got a lot, not only about James Delos, but about William, you know, his motivations, you know, whether you agree with how he's going about them or not, his actions, you know, his motivations are more external than they are internal. I took it as he was always trying to recapture something with Dolores, and he was trying to recapture that, but for more of an external motivation than the internal. And we do have to look at him in a different light. I also love how we start the episode with him as the creator and end with him embracing death. I mean, I just think it was beautifully done, beautifully shot all the way around. I mean, for Lisa Joy's directorial debut, I mean, she knocked it out of the park, plain and simple.
Absolutely, I agree completely, and I think that this sets up what happened after the last scene that we saw James Delos in, which was this his retirement party, and then it takes it through with just like 3 different scenes, effectively, all the way through to the present day. And this idea that they are trying to develop the technology was all the way through this, and actually I think has got quite serious implications, because right at the end, it's very clear that the Man in Black Williams says effectively, we're nearly there. We've nearly nailed this. Let's not forget. Sorry, go ahead, Hax.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I was just saying another year or two, and they would have it a long-term host viable.
Absolutely.
And it's also important to remember that if you look at the tablet and the date, that's exactly 1 day before he enters the park for the events of season 1, when he leaves the Delos project for the last time we see.
That's a good spot. So this happened right before the events of season 1, and
yes.
it's worth noting, I think, that when we say that they're nearly there, they're just a year or 2 away from it. James Delos, that last one, survived for over a month. So it wasn't just this the idea that he sort of like they brought him back and he like appeared for a day and then disappeared again and it started glitching. No, he had those more than 30, I think it was like 32, 35 days of him going through this routine of him being him before he started to glitch. So that's how close they are. And do you think, and then I know this is a theory that I've had, and we'll come onto it in more detail in a moment, but Hax, let's just ask you then, do you think therefore that it's possible that Ford is at the same level? Do you think Ford could theoretically do the same kind of thing?
Yeah, so the idea of Ford being involved with mapping the human mind to a host really hasn't been brought to light, right? Like I feel like it's implied, but there's really no evidence that he was working on that project or that he had anything to do with it. But the idea of him being, 2 steps ahead of Delos and pretty much every project they worked on, it's definitely there. So if they do go that route, then I think that what the writers would need to do is kind of add something to that to maybe link it, not just, all of a sudden Ford was able to do this when prior we had no idea that he was also working on this project. So possible, but right now I don't think we have the evidence to support it.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Ford is always, and this is his technology fundamentally. Yes, we've had this huge research project, and Delos have obviously got billions to throw at it, but this is the technology that Ford and Arnold between them invented. So he's almost certainly understanding what they're doing, if not being 1 step ahead. But I think to bring it back onto the Man in Black, which is the lens through which we see this, he goes on a journey here. He starts out this was almost what he was pitching to James Delos in saying, this is why we should have Westworld. This is what's going on. This is the grand plan. We can give you immortality. But he seems to go on a journey. Now, Justin, from your perspective, what does that tell us about where he's at now in terms of how he views his own creation?
I think that I relate him to Oppenheimer, obviously, like with the nuclear research, and there's obviously big differences, but there's similarities with that as well. I think he's, a little bit regretful. I think he is obviously frustrated. Jimmy Simpson, the actor that plays William did a wonderful job of going from optimism to frustration to sadness to anger. He obviously is not in line with his initial thoughts, but the thing that really sticks out for me is we don't, as far as like Ford knowing about it, we kind of have to assume Ford knows about this because it kind of breaks everything else. I mean, Ford seems to be involved in everything. So why would this be the one thing he wasn't involved in, whether Jimmy or William knew it or not? We have no reference to like what William's skill sets are. Is he just throwing money at this and there's other researchers? I mean, literally, we have like no reference to like what is his expertise. Is he just a money man? Is he with biotech and medical research? You know, I mean, was he just in there for the interviews, like he said, or does he actually have a mind for this? And Ford has a knack for coming in and fixing what other people's couldn't fix. So, you know, I think that it says to me that definitely Ford came in and probably perfected. I mean, yeah, I mean, we don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that, yeah, that's probably what we're going to get. Ford came in and kind of perfected whether it was William in a team or just William master planning the whole thing. You know, why wouldn't Ford know about this? He knows about every single other aspect. And we see him sending Bernard to, you know, to copy a brain to clone somebody. So he obviously understands this to a point. But yeah, it's definitely the implications for how we have to look at William, excuse me, Jimmy Simpson. I feel like I'm on a first name basis with him for some reason. With William is huge. You know, I mean, I like it because it makes us look at the story in a different way. We're starting to see his turn now. I do think they should have spread that out a little bit because it's leading to some crazy theories. But yeah, I mean, it's a whole new POV. Both literally and, you know, like in the show, it's a whole new POV for us. It's a whole new POV for him. It's very enticing to me.
Yeah, I think I think the issue with us assuming that Ford has contributed advances to this, like I believe that he knew about it, you know, and it's kind of proved by, you know, us being able to determine the events where Bernard went into this facility, killed all the hosts or killed all the humans, and made this control unit definitely happened before the massacre, and maybe in the same trip that he kidnapped Elsie and dropped her off at that cave. So he had to have known about it. But I don't think that proves that he made any advances on it or understood that you know, maybe. Well, no, I guess, I mean, if. Okay, so it proves a couple of things. So they have to have other people that have been successfully transferred from this module to a host body and at work. Because if Ford knew about the project, he would definitely know that James Delos was going through the issues he was going through. And if Ford is trying to get Arnold or whoever or even himself onto a control unit, then looking through the lens of it only being a failure from William's perspective on James Delos, then Ford would never subject anyone to that, let alone his best friend or himself, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, so my take on this is that Ford definitely knew what was going on. I think he, as we say, that's obvious from the fact that he sent Bernard there. That was just, he knew what was happening. I think he was probably happy for them to do the research because he wanted them to be throwing their billions of dollars at it that he didn't have to actually make the progress. And then the moment that they'd reached the level of progress that he was happy with, that he felt he could do something with, that's the moment that he swooped. And I think I want to get on in a little bit later when we're talking about Bernard to what that sort of control unit, what that host brain thing ball was. But I think just to sort of to wrap this up, Justin, you mentioned what William's added value was effectively. What was he good at? Was he a money man or whatever? I think his added value, his USP, his unique selling point, was his strategic direction. I think that he was the leader. He was the person who came up with the ideas. He was the person who understood the actual value of the technology in a way that Logan didn't, and in a way that James Delos didn't. I think he was the one who spotted how they could actually turn this into something which could make Delos, as an organization, what appears to be the biggest and most significant organization on the planet. So that's where I think he fits in. But can I just, before we leave this little bit there were a few revelations, a few things that William said when he went in to see James Delos about what was going on in the outside world. And so can I just throw at you Logan, and Justin, let's go to you, because I know that we've discussed this a little bit. William said that Logan overdosed. Do you think that means that Logan is dead? Do you think that means that we're not going to see him again?
Yeah, he's dead. It's on the Wikipedia page, which hasn't lied to us so far. He's been changed from alive to deceased. And I mean, just think about the dialogue. I mean, he says he's gone. He overdosed. So, you know, he doesn't need to say yes, overdosing is not dying. I'm well aware of that. But, you know, he's like, he overdosed. So yes, now he is dead. James Delos. You know, I mean, it's I get it, and logically approaching it, by the way he's presenting everybody is gone in your life, when he tells him, in the same sentence that he's telling him that Juliet is gone, he's explaining who else is gone. So the way that he's framing this conversation is, these are the people that are gone from your life, and he's mentioning Logan. He's just mentioning in the way in which he is gone. So yeah, and then if you just want hard proof, you just go to the Wikipedia page, and he has now been changed to deceased. So
full disclaimer: Wikipedia is just, or the Wikipedia page is just other people interpreting the show, and but like I could change the Wikipedia page, right? But I think this is a very good point though. Like I'm looking at the script now. It says Logan overdosed years ago, couldn't face reality either. And I think that kind of goes back to the conversation that we see with Logan and Dolores in the outside world about changing reality or the death of humanity or the context of something like that. So I think it kind of leaves it open, but I've actually never thought of this. So when you brought it up, Robert, that's very interesting. But I guess with the context, I also agree that yeah, he's probably dead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with this. I think we have to take it with a pinch of salt, because this is William saying it, and maybe he was lying. There's no reason for him to do so, and it was slightly vague language. He could have just said he's dead, he overdosed and died. He didn't say that. But I think probably he is now gone. That doesn't, however, mean that this is the last we see of the character, because Westworld does jump around a lot in terms of the timelines, and there are at least 2 scenes that appeared in the pre-season trailer that we haven't yet seen from him. So there's a chance that we might still, that they might have been cut, who knows, but there's a chance that we will still see the character, even if in the current timeline the character is dead.
Yeah, there's still the jump. It's kind of like the same thing with William becoming the Man in Black, and they give the exposition over the campfire. I mean, that's not quite enough. So I think that, yes, you're right. We'll see some scenes that happened in between his, him still being alive and then the overdose. But yeah, I mean, in Wikipedia, yes, Hex is right. People can mess with it. They do tend to get it right back to where it's supposed to be pretty quick. But yes, I mean, like it can be fucked with. But yeah, I mean, with the way the conversation was framed, I would say it's safe to say he's dead, and we'll see a little bit more of him before he dies with the timeline.
Absolutely, I think we're in broad agreement on that, guys. So let's keep with the Man in Black, and let's just shoot forward to let's call it the current timeline, the sort of the post massacre, post end of season 1 massacre timeline, where we've got the Man in Black now, who's being sort of taken on this new game by Ford, it would appear. Hax, do you want to pick up on this one first? What did we learn? There was this whole scene of where he went there with Lawrence's family, and then there was the Confederados, and then they sort of moved on from that. What did we learn from that scene?
Yeah, so essentially what we learned is redemption arc. I think 100% this character that they've developed as the white hat to the black hat, understanding that his place in the world was, just as the little man being suppressed by the boss's son, so to speak. And for him to have that revelation, to turn around, to use his power and use his voice, is like the confidence thing. It's the builder that really anyone can go out and do this. So he goes from white hat, black hat, understands his place, rises to power through what we can interpret as probably corrupting and probably not the most ethical ways. And what the scene shows from the rain scene, when he reflects in himself what he sees in Lawrence and the wife and the daughter, it's so amazing. It's honestly so overlooked. I mean, it is my second favorite scene in this entire season. It's really him reflecting in his life to Lawrence's life, and then the very first road, or the very first step in this, maybe he's going to become a good guy again.
Absolutely, I think I'd agree with that. And incidentally, I did spot Kerry McDonald, the super chat. Thank you so much for that. That's very kind. We'll get to that in just a few minutes, I think, when we start talking about Emily, who's obviously appears in this very at the very end of this bit of Man in Black's timeline. But Justin, did you have any other thoughts on how that scene panned out?
I think it was excellent. And remember how we were like kind of just trying to like do mental gymnastics to figure out why on earth that Dolores was, or Dolores / whatever Dolores was trying to, get rid of Craddock. I think that this answered it. And unfortunately, this goes against what I wanted to believe, but I do believe that Ford has a lot more control than I wanted to admit about what's going on right now. That doesn't mean that they don't have free will. It doesn't mean that they're not making their own decisions, blah, blah, blah. But Craddock had to be with the Man in Black in that situation to perfectly mirror his actions from season 1 to trigger, I think, a little bit of a sudden PTSD. The only issue I have with that is people are now coming to the conclusion, a small part of the community, that the Man in Black that we're seeing right now is a host Man in Black because they see that as like his cornerstone kicking in. I think that shows, because they're like, he wasn't there for the overdose. He was told this, through his daughter. So why is he imagining the tub and the blood and all that? Well, as humans, we visualize things, and we don't visualize them perfectly as hosts do. So I think it's a perfect representation of how a human would. If your wife died in this manner, you would visualize it, sadly. You would relive it through your own mind and be in agony over it. So I think that's what's happening. And I'm with Hacks on this. So those visuals were excellent.
So
excellent. Yeah, so not that I enjoy that his wife committed suicide or anything, but I'm saying that these, oh man, with just the mixing from the water dripping off the rooftops to the water dripping from the bathtub. And as far as the blood, for anybody bringing that up, I don't want to get too into like how this can, be actually possible. I mean, if you overdose, you probably would have some blood due to throwing it up, it coming out your nose and so on, unfortunately. So there is credence to blood being in that tub. It's and again, it's probably just a human agonizing over this and thinking it over in their head. So it also can be a little bit blown up as well, like a little bit exaggerated in your own head, because we don't remember like hosts remember. We see how hosts remember in this, and I'm sure we're going to get to that with Bernard. They remember exact. We don't. We visualize things for the better or worse in our own ways.
Exactly, and I just want to echo the thoughts about how great the direction here is. Lisa Joy, if this really was her first time directing, it was astonishingly good. The thing which really got me was that this was, and I think this is actually part of Ford's game for the Man in Black. It was very clearly mirroring what happened in season 1, when he went to that very same place, and he was the person who was taunting and bullying and killing the people of that village and Lawrence's family. So the things that we saw Major Craddock do were things that we saw the Man in Black do in season 1. So it's almost as if what Ford is doing is taking him back to a time when he was doing a bad thing, and making him redeem himself, making him be the kind of the white hat guy coming in, saving the villagers from the people who are terrorizing them. So, and that was shown not just in terms of what was said, but also just visually with this, the mirroring of what happened in that episode in season 1. And if you ever watch them side by side, it's really quite dramatic how clear that is. So then we get, if we sort of move through this, is that we get, at the end, we get Ford again, and this is, I counted for the 3rd time, but there might be another one. He talks directly to William, to the Man in Black, through Lawrence's daughter. Now, he again says cryptic stuff. And I think perhaps, Hacks, this is a thing that you might want to pick up on. The message here was, if you're looking forward, then you're looking in the wrong direction, which seems to echo what he was saying the previous time through the child Ford. What do we think Ford is actually trying to do, regardless of who or where Ford is right now, what's going on there? What do you think Ford is trying to do with this game for the Man in Black?
Yeah, it actually got vastly complicated when this line was delivered, because what we know so far is that he's on his way to the Valley Beyond, going to destroy this thing that he's created. So is that not what Ford wants him to do? And that's the direction he's moving. He's moving forward this thing. So maybe it's more of a conceptual thing, that he's trying to make him understand that, hey, your journey is not to do this. I don't want you to do this. I want you to understand who you were before. My thought originally was that William is going to be the person that gets the awakened hosts out of the park, who actually, aids in their escape and understands what he understood in Dolores all those years ago, that, hey, these can be alive, feeling creatures, and go back to more of his white hat roots. So I think that I still believe in that theory. that William's journey is now, a journey inward to himself, like the maze was for hosts. So yeah, I think that's really where I'm at with that.
And I'd agree with that completely. I think that this is Ford trying to get the Man in Black to confront who he was, and try in the same way that he talks about himself, saying that he has to put right what he did wrong in the past. I think he is trying to get the Man in Black. He's trying to get William to put right what he did in the past. So I think that this is not going to be an isolated incident when we see this mirroring of the Man in Black of a bad thing that he did in the past, and he now has to sort of reevaluate that and decide what he does now. I think we're going to see that again and again and again, moving towards the finale at the end of the season, when he does finally reach the valley beyond glory, whatever it is. That's the point where he faces what he created, and now he has to decide what he does about that. And I think the clear implication is that he's going to try and destroy what he created. But let's move on to Emily. So this is the character that we had introduced in what I think we call Raj World, last episode 3, and then she appears again in episode 4 and escapes the Ghost Nation, who we can talk about it, guys, if you want to. Let us know in the chat. But I think for me it's pretty clear they were collecting the humans, the guests, the people who were innocent in some way, and with a view to protecting them in some way, probably because that was what Ford wanted, but we can talk about that a little bit more. But anyway, Emily escapes from this, and she then comes up at the very end of the episode and confronts William, the Man in Black, and says, hi, Dad. She is that daughter that we saw that he had. We got the whole backstory before about the fact that the mother committed suicide, so William's wife committed suicide, that that she then blamed her father for it, and then they were estranged, and so then she's back in the park. Now, we'll talk about why she's there more broadly in just a second, but Kerry McDonald, I did say we would come to your super chat. Thank you again for that. That's very kind. Saying, do you think that Ford had Grace, Emily, in on the game for the Man in Black? And thank you for being great. Thank you for your generosity. That's very kind. So let's go, Justin. Let's go to you first. Do you think that she is there because of Ford? Do you think he brought her in, or do you think she's there of her own volition?
She was there on her own volition in the Raj, the park that's so easy to say with their clever name, the Raj, the world she was in. She was there. That was her own decision to be there, and she was there investigating what I'm going to call the end game. Obviously, she has the symbols and all that, and she wants to know. But it's important to note that William, the Man in Black, has no control over the other parks. He is a majority shareholder of specifically Westworld. So that is the park that he can play God in. He has nothing. He's on the board. He's not even an executive board member on Delos as a whole. Don't even try to get into that structure of that company. I have no fucking clue how he's not running the whole thing, but he's not. So I believe that she was on purpose in the Raj to try to be figuring this park out. And I think Ford forced her into William's world, which is Westworld. You know, we saw it very, literally forced into the world by being chased by the Bengal tiger and picked up by Ghost Nation, which is obviously being used as a tool for Ford. Again, like I said, I've been forced to believe that Ford has much more control than I wanted to in the start of the season. I think that, yes, Ford has brought her into this game in Westworld now, but her being in the Raj was, on her own volition. That was her doing her thing. She's not trying to meet up with her dad. She has met up with her dad because of the circumstances, and I think Ford wanted that, but I don't see a father-daughter bonding session, like I said in my video, but I also don't see a father-daughter slaughter either. So I think, yes, Ford pushed those worlds together, but I think she was in the Raj for a reason. She was trying to avoid her father and just try to figure out this place.
Hax, have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah. So, Justin, I'm pretty sure I disagree with everything you said. So, firstly, I was under the assumption that he was CEO of Delos Destinations, which does own every park, right? And and then another group to this this entire corporation set is the research group. So there's the research group, the Delos Destinations, and then Delos Incorporated. Well, before James dies, he does say, are you having fun effing my daughter, having fun running my company? So I do believe he does ascend to that position, right? And it's not just he's the controller of Westworld; it is the suite of parks. And then as for getting Emily Grace to the Man in Black, I think it is an insane feat and Dell Security. I think it is an insane feat for her and him to cross paths in this entire park after everything that she's gone through. Managed to escape Ghost Nation, get a horse, meet in the middle of nowhere, assumingly, and yeah. So I really do think that they were going to the same spot, this Valley Beyond being that symbol, the corporate research group that committed so much resource to make this grand thing hidden in the park. So I do think that with that comes a lot of conflict, though, because the father-daughter relationship is strained from the accounts that we've seen from William's perspective. So I think that we're going to have a lot of issues with that. And I believe that in her opening sequence, when she was first talking about why she was there, she says that, Nicholas says that she was hunting somebody or wanting to kill something, and she kind of pauses and is like, among other things. So it's like I could make the case that she might be there to murder her father, but just potentially, maybe. But I do think that they are now going to this Valley Beyond to try to take something out.
I do have to have a counterpoint on that, because I mean, strictly, like, by everything we have to say, yeah, with what's been said in the series, it is confusing because he's like, oh, it seems more like a coronation and all this. But when you look at Delos as a corporation, as I have like in depth, he is only the majority shareholder, and they do speak to he only has that type of control with Westworld. And Delos Destinations, yes, he is a part of, but it is very confusing the way they've set it up, because why aren't they looking for him? Why aren't they more concerned with where the head of if he's the head of Delos? They don't really seem to give a shit about him. He's just playing in the park. The issue with that is, and then we have people like Charlotte Hale, who is she speaking to on the other side? If it ends with William, if he's at the top, he's not privy to all this. I mean, they run their own personal navy. He's not a part of that. They run Space 46, I believe is the name. We see that that's the building that Bernard and or Arnold and Dolores are leaving. He is in control of Westworld, and really nothing else from what it seems. It doesn't make sense, I agree, because they're talk with it, but also it does make sense. I mean, look, they're not worried. It seems, for all they know, he's dead right now, right? They assume he's dead, and
Sure.
That's not even a big deal. Like,
Sure.
If he's the head of everything, you know what I mean? That doesn't really add up. That doesn't really jive. They're like, oh, he's dead. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think the entire plot for them to wait 2 weeks to rescue this insane $1 trillion amount of data stored on a host, and they're leaving it to Bernard and Charlotte to go again rescue this data when they have an entire armed forces fleet to go do this. I think the entire plan is kind of silly, and I think that there's more that we haven't learned of it, which might be it. It might be something like the Cradle or I don't really know, but I do think that, like, the connotation of him saying, are you having fun running my company? He might not be talking about Delos Incorporated. He could be talking about the Delos division that's doing this research for, I believe it's like biomolecular something. He says something, or someone said something, but it's essentially the biotechnology company.
Yeah, it's like the biotech, the medical research. I agree with you on that. I mean, I think we shouldn't like try to pick apart whether he runs everything. From everything I've read that's, on that we can actually read about this, the structure of this company, which is rather confusing. Again, we don't know what his qualifications. I would love to do a job interview with the Man in Black to be doing any of this are. But yeah, I mean, I guess, we shouldn't pick it apart too much. I think we can both agree that it doesn't quite add up. He's either the most powerful person or he's nothing, and they're kind of riding that line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the honest answer is we do not know yet because they've not told us. And I think the honest answer about Emily is also that we do not know the entirety of it yet because they haven't told us. Just while we're on things that are mysteries, I actually think the biggest mystery for me so far of season 2 is who was Charlotte talking to? Who was Charlotte getting instructions from in episode 1? Because whoever it was, she's the executive director. She is only taking instructions from whoever's at the top of the organization, and that appeared not to be William, the Man in Black. That appeared to be somebody else. So I think that's a huge mystery that we haven't yet solved. But to come back to Emily, I think from my perspective, I don't think it's a coincidence that she just happened to stumble across her father there. I think that having found herself in Westworld, I think that she is heading to the same place as the Man in Black. I think that that's what the symbol was. She was going around all of the bit that we had in the first part of episode 3 when she was there in the Raj on the hunt with her little book. That was a map. She was trying to find something. She was trying to find a way to get to something, and the symbols seemed to imply that this was the secret research project for some either the place where James Delos was being sort of continually remade, or the Valley Beyond. Now, the fact that she then got into Westworld, it could have been Ford with huge amounts of control over that tiger, driving her where he wanted to. I don't think we know. But whatever, once she's in the park, and it's very clear, I think that she has been in Westworld before, because Stubbs certainly knew who she was and was having a good chat with her, and seemed to imply the amount of time you've been here, surely you know what the language was. She's been to Westworld before. I think she was in the Raj to try and find another way in to where she was trying to go, and I think she's now met up with her father because she thinks that he will know where to go. I think that is why she hunted him down and found him, not for a father-daughter sort of summit, having a chat through their issues. I think that's what will happen, but I don't think that's why she went and found him. Okay, guys, let's take a very brief pause here. Just while I've got you both on, do you want to talk about? I don't know who wants to do this. Justin, do you want to just quickly tell us about Before the Dust Settles?
Yeah, Before the Dust Settles. If you guys enjoy the back and forth between me and Hax, who that's why we love having it. Me and Hax agree on very little about this show, and that's why actually I not only is he so smart and talented, but why I go and try to find a panel of people that have different opinions. We don't want just the kissing each other's ass the whole time. So yeah, Before the Dust Settles is me and Hax, and usually Debbie Santa, but this week will be AU Pack Mule, who I believe is in the chat. They'll be joining us for our third. Very excited for this. We break down the episode literally. I mean, half the time we miss like parts and we have to fill each other in because we were trying to set this up. We literally are not afraid to go off with our initial thoughts and like just give Before the Dust Settles everything that we thought happened, what this means, and our initial thoughts before you see our more researched and fleshed out explained videos, whatever you want to call it, summaries and so forth. And it's very exciting to have AU on. It's very exciting to work with Hax, like I said, especially working with people that you don't have the same opinions. I think that's when you get the best result. You get to see my perspective, Hax's perspective. Now we're going to throw AU in the mix and get a little bit of that AU perspective. So yeah, if you guys love the show and you truly want people talking about the show in the most intelligent way that is possible, like 5 minutes after the show, tune in for Before the Dust Settles. We will have the link up as soon as possible. We're trying to avoid having 10 different links this week like we had last week. But yeah, that's about it.
Fantastic. Hax, is there anything you want to draw people's attention to?
Yeah, I mean, please definitely check out the Justin Thomas show. His channel will be hosting the Before the Dust Settles Instacast. As for me, my name's Hax Dogma. I do Westworld videos bi-weekly. If you want to be involved in the community and hear about new theories, I just published a Cats in the Cradle theory. Please do check it out. Once again, Hax Dogma.
Fantastic. And guys, you're already on my channel. If you're into Westworld and you also like Game of Thrones, please check out my Game of Thrones videos. I produce a couple every week. That'll probably increase again once we're out of Westworld. But if you like the content that we've got going on here on Westworld, then it's the same kind of thing that I do for Game of Thrones. I would also just want to say to my patrons, thank you so much. I say it every time, but I could not do this without you. The Varys video that you decided that you wanted me to do a video on what Varys heard in the flames, that's coming out in the next couple of days. I've written it already. I just need to get it all uploaded. And also for my patrons, I do exclusive audio narrations of the Winds of Winter preview chapters, pre-release chapters that George R.R. Martin has done. The next one is also going to be out this week, so keep an eye out for that, patrons. And also, I've teased for a couple of the last couple of my live streams. I've got a big new project that I'm going to be announcing soon that I'm really excited by. Something people have been asking me about for a while, and I'm going to be announcing that probably on my Thursday Game of Thrones live stream. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, guys. Let's get back to talking about Westworld. Let's get back to talking about the last episode, because the other main character, we were talking about the Man in Black. The other main character in this one is, of course, Bernard. And he goes through a huge amount in this, and we learn a huge amount about what's going on with him in episode 4. Let's go to Justin first on this one. So do you want to just quickly, from your perspective, what happened with Bernard in this episode? What was actually going on?
Well, we obviously see a subversion of the allegory of the cave, with him being drugged into the cave, quite literally. So we do, the one question that is on my mind is, was that on Clementine? Is Clementine in the control of Dolores or Ford? I mean, that was like, it reminded me of a video game when you get too far off course and they just like move you like physically to the spot you're supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like that's what it reminded me of. It's like, okay, no. I mean, we see it in my video, if you see where I say make it simple, and I definitely should have just made it don't focus on the text so much, because it's not at all simple. It's like looking at more of the philosophical aspect of it. But yeah, he's being enlightened, and he's found Elsie. We find Elsie in a situation that it doesn't quite jive. I wouldn't read too much into it. She couldn't have been there for more than 3 days if she doesn't have water. And yeah, it is what it is. They did their best. I mean, she doesn't have all the makeup on that she would usually have on, but I do tend to believe that this is what's happening. I'm only mentioning this because Hax has a very intelligent counterpoint to this, as always. But I do think this is what's happening. I think they did their best to make the actress look, a little bit shitty, but it's Hollywood, so it is what it is. It doesn't quite add up the situation. But yeah, we are seeing him come out essentially to Elsie about being a host, because he's on the brink of death. And we're seeing him, and we're seeing how hosts remember things again compared to how humans remember things. They remember exact, and he's following these these memories, and he's going into the cave, and we're seeing that this is the reveal that lets us know that Ford, I think it's fair to say, he probably sandbagged the situation, like Robert was saying earlier. He watched them until he got to a certain point, and then he went in because, again, they're the money people. So he let them tear all that money into this James Delos project, which maybe could be another reason why William has lost control. Maybe he spent so much of the money on that project, and he is, his level of control has, become far less because of this. So yeah, we essentially just see the other side, the side of what Ford was doing with the James Delos project, and we see what the drone hosts are doing. We also get the reveal that Arnold has killed, and he is keeping this away from Elsie. Elsie is quite the character, but she should not be trusting Bernard. He immediately lies to her. We see the completion of a copy being made that is for Ford. They say it, so we know he knows about it at some point, and it's really interesting. The one thing I take away, and I want to know Hax and Robert's opinion on this, they do get rid of James Delos in the same way that Man in Black was getting rid of James Delos every single time. So I don't think we have any reason to believe that James Delos is completely gone. I mean, the method of destruction, whatever, termination, was the same. Was there any difference in your guys' opinion?
No, I mean, a couple things with that. I thought it was really interesting that Elsie so quickly navigated that menu and was like, okay, well, save your bullet. I'm just going to incinerate them. Boop, 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 boop. And I know this entire interface and complete. I think it was interesting, but yeah, I mean, his his mind is definitely still mapped to something. The cradle itself, what we know about it, it does store host storylines, right? So I believe that the other half of the cradle is that it does have all of these host storylines in storage. So there is one master server that they kind of back host storylines up to, and the being in and of itself.
Yeah, and just to pick up on the first bit of this, and I think we'll get onto the how technically that all works and what the implications of that are in just one second. The sort of the lead up to this, I think the very clear implication is that what happened there was exactly what Ford wanted to happen. And as Justin said, we're discovering quite the extent to which Ford has got control over what is happening in season 2 in the way that he did in season 1. We perhaps assumed that season 2 would be less about him, but actually there's a huge amount going on. So Clementine, I think, quite clearly is working for Ford, or was programmed. She was one of the people down there in cold storage, if you remember, and that was the group of people that Ford got to go up to the surface to launch that ambush and attack. So she is part of that group that Ford made do a thing. So she's working for him. She brought Bernard to where he had left Elsie beforehand. Elsie, if you remember, had already been captured previously by Bernard on Ford's doing. So the whole point of what was going on there was that Ford was making sure that Bernard went back to find Elsie again, to team up with Elsie again, and also in that cave where he would get triggered his memories of going in there before, and so he would then find what happened before. So that was all Ford's doing to try and get them to that point. He wanted Bernard to understand that he had gone there before and to remember that he'd taken that little control unit ball. So why don't we look at we saw two bits there going on at the same time. I should probably just say, in case it wasn't completely clear, Bernard had flashbacks of the previous time that he was there. The first time he went there was when he grabbed the ball, when he got the clone host to kill all of the human witnesses to that and then destroyed themselves. And then the second time he started having the flashbacks to that, and they met James Delos. And just as an aside, Elsie seems to have patched him up and I think got rid of the little scar, which will probably also help identify which version of Bernard we're seeing each time. So that was what was going on. Is there anything else either of you guys want to pick up on about before we get on to what this little control ball actually is, to what was happening there, what actually happened in that action? Was there anything that you just want to highlight?
I think that just we do have to look at both, like my way of thinking and also but Hax's way of thinking. Even though I don't like his theory, we do have to look at how convenient it was that no, I mean, I'm giving, there's a lot of credence to what he's saying. It's just,
yeah, you could.
Yeah, like there is inconsistencies. Elsie's very quick to, learn the system. Everything seems to be working as if what Hax is proposing is true. It does add up. You know what I mean? But there's the other side that you have to look at. It is a TV show, so we have to think, okay, did they just kind of need to move this along a little bit quicker? So, I mean, I'm struggling with it as well. You know what I mean? It's not about who's right, who's wrong. It's about, you do need to look at both sides of, is this just, the way the series needed to progress and they need to push things along. And Elsie is a behavioral tech. So she's, just more inclined to just trust the code and, not see we already see a little bit of foreshadowing of her being accepting a post in the first season, in connecting with them with the Clementine scene and all that. But again, there's like, it's like 50-50 for me. So I think that it is important that you look at both sides of this. And this is not completely clear if this is what is actually happening.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know if we can assume that Elsie resolves the scar on his head, right? Because we know that what Felix does, and granted, she is a more advanced technician and potentially could do something like that, but it's not shown. And I think the reason that it's not shown is because it doesn't happen. So I think if it's just, the simple healing laser gun, then what that scar was created from was that, so I don't know what it could be other than it's a flashback. So when Bernard comes through, he's already in another flashback. and then he has a flashback while in that, making it flashbackception. But I don't know exactly what it means. Like I've so methodically gone through every scene to try to figure out what this could be. And I posted a video about how it could all be just a simulation with the cradle, and I'm more leaning to that more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think that's for those who haven't seen Hax's video. I would highly recommend you go over and have a look there as a completely different way of viewing the season so far, what we've seen about Bernard's perspective so far, the sort of the face value that we've been given, that at the moment I'm personally sticking with, is this idea that Elsie repaired him with one of those little zappy things to get rid of the scar. I think, and please correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, I think we saw him after that without the scar, and the scar is just the sort of the outside visible effect of what Felix did.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that he has completely healed himself. Now, we have to remember that he went into his death cycle. Back in episode 1, we heard all of these different things being listed, the problems that we'd have about him, time slippage, and a variety of other things that are going on. I think it's pretty clear he is still damaged from what happened to him when he shot himself in the head and then got repeated bangs in the head. I mean, he's had like 3 or 4 bangs in the head since then, which is pretty bad going. So I think he's still got problems, but she has sort of patched him up a little bit. I think what's probably will find us happen is that she's put the brain fluid back in and she's sealed up the leak. I think that's probably where we've got to. So he's not going to get any worse, but he's also not improved in his position. So I think personally that's where we're at.
I think, sorry. Preston Jacobs said something that, love him or hate him, and he does nitpick things too much. He recently said Westworld is one of those shows that is very confusing at first, but then once you start paying attention a lot to the detail, it starts making sense. But then if you start paying real attention, like looking at it really in depth, per se, like how detail oriented Hax is, it stops making sense. So there's like a little bit of an issue. So like, that's the paradox of Westworld. And I love the show. This is like what my channel is really all about. I focus on Westworld. I do talk about other things, but my main focus is Westworld. So in no way am I trying to, make the show seem like it's not good, but it is true to a point that if you start looking into things too much, it starts making, you got to make a decision there. You have to like where you want to stop, like trying to prove everything to be this or that, because sometimes you just have to kick back and be like, okay, it is a show, because if you get too detail oriented with it, it can get a little bit confusing. So that's where I'm at with it. I'm still 50-50 on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think as with every TV show, and in fact every act of creation, there's a sense of the suspension of disbelief that we have to go along with in this. We have to buy into the story, and we have to kind of like accept the fact that there will be human error in writing the story. There will be little bits of detail that they get wrong and all the rest of it. I think if we want to enjoy it as I enjoy the show, then we have to kind of accept the fact that there are some things which don't make 100% sense, because they are there in order to make the story develop properly. I just want to say, Susan Dunkel, I thank you so much for your super chat. That's incredibly generous. $10. That's very kind. We'll get onto that just in 1 second, because I want to bring us around to the whole point of Bernard's first visit to that facility, was that he went there in order to collect that little control unit ball thing. Now, Susan's question is I think related to perhaps the theory that I had, which was that this control unit ball is like, this is the culmination of where all of Delos's research has got to, and you can use one of them, and superimprint onto that some personalities and effectively a map of someone's mind, and that is what can create a human host hybrid. But Hax, let's go to you. What do you think that ball thing is, and what do you think that, or why do you think that Ford wanted it?
So I do think that what we can take from it is this was something Ford, that is a human mapped mind onto this control unit, and that it was purposeful by Ford. So really, there's three there's two candidates. It could either be Ford, it could be Arnold, or so three: Ford, Arnold, or maybe even William. And with that come a lot of interesting things that you could really break down. But at face value, without getting too in depth to it, I think that Arnold was Ford's best friend, and the loss of him was a huge thing for his life, and the 35 years to make up for what he did could be 35 years worth of working on this to bring him back to life, becoming, resurrecting Lazarus from the dead. I think that it could equally be Ford, though it kind of dampens the impact of his death, and maybe not Ford. Possible, but probably not plausible.
Sure.
And then finally, William, I think, is the last one. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of William going to this maze or going on this journey, becoming who he is. And, the twist is, no, William, you need to become a host hybrid to really usher in this new phase of humanity. Maybe Ford saw the good in William after all, and really didn't think that William needed to die. He just needed to be in a place of sympathy so that he could relate and be one of the good guys once again. So I think it's one of those.
Okay, I mean, I think I would agree with you that the amount of potential candidates is actually quite small.
Yeah.
Justin, if you want to pick up on this, I had a super chat that before we went on air, actually, from one of my patrons, Alissa Mutlu, saying, is the control panel, I think the control unit, the ball thing, a prototype of Ford or a prototype of human DNA that is not a particular individual but a prototype of human DNA? So do we think that this was a specific mind that's been mapped onto that ball, or do you think it's a generic thing? They've got the technology for this is what humanity looks like, and then they imprint a particular person onto it. Which of those do you think is the most likely?
To serve the story and serve the themes of the story, I would go with the second option, that is more of a generic. It's going to be the way for them to successfully have the option, because I believe that, you notice that when they talk to William, they said the maze wasn't for him, but then he says he's at the center of the maze because the maze wasn't for him, because he didn't need to go through. He was going through that journey of the struggle. The maze is based off that symbol of life, where it's a Native American tale I talked about in the last video, and at the very end you have a turn, so the man needs to look back. How many times have we heard you need to stop looking forward, meaning you need to look back at your life and then accept death? I do think this is going to accumulate into a story of Jimmy Simpson's character and Ed Harris's Man in Black seeing each other, and because it would make sense that he would, as a safeguard, map his own consciousness and have a hybrid of him somewhere. And I do think Vanessa Cole's theory on Watchers on the Wall, which I linked and cited in my last video, is great, where it comes to him facing the decision of immortality or death, because you can't have life without death. You need death to have life. He's always talking about stakes. There's no stakes if you have immortality. So I think he's going to have to literally choose life by choosing death, meaning he's going to have to get rid of the host version of himself. It gets a little bit wacky there, but yeah, I think it's the second. I think we're going to have the ability for this to be possible, because this fits the narrative. This fits a way for the host to be able to leave the park successfully. It being Ford doesn't really do anything. I also agree with Hacks that it's really between, also, if you don't want to go with the generic one, it's more between an Arnold, which the timelines don't really add up for that, which is an issue. But again, it's a television show, or William specifically. But I do think that it doesn't fit the narrative for it to be Ford. You cannot take away his sacrifice on season 1.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with all of that, except for the timelines don't work out for it being Arnold. And I want to pick up on Susan Dunkel's super chat again. Thank you. Sorry, I spotted it a while ago, but I thought this is probably the best time to cover it. When you say, it appears to me that Ford was working on Arnold separately, but at the same time as the Delos project. Only Robert Ford kept his mistakes, learned and evolved from them. Why all those Arnolds in storage? So yes, I think I would say, I think that Ford was working on this as a concept all the way from the beginning. And he allowed Delos to carry on with their work and took their work when he wanted it. but I think that he was working on Arnold, Bernard all the way through this. Now, the reason why I picked up on what Justin was saying about the timelines don't quite work out, and I accept the point. And again, you talked about Vanessa Cole. Hi, Vanessa, if you're watching. I think it's an incredibly valid point that in order for this to work, then Ford would have had to have mapped the mind of his partner early on before he died. Now, the implication was that they didn't have the technology at the time. I think they didn't have the technology at the time to make the human host hybrid, but I think that they may well have had the technology to do the mapping. All we know about how the mapping works so far is that the implication of what we've seen is that this involves getting DNA, which he certainly could have got DNA from his partner, and it involves having hold of the memories and the actions of a person which are recorded by the hosts, which again Ford would have access to. So he may well have had all the raw materials, just not known how to use them in order to recreate the person of Arnold. He could create a host who looked like him and acted like him, which he did with Bernard. He was teaching him the mannerisms with the taking the pausing and cleaning his glasses and all that. But he couldn't map everything on there. He had the information he needed, but not yet all of the abilities. So for me, yes, you need to take a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but everything we've been told about how the process works seems to imply that all he had to do was collect the raw materials, and then the technology came later for how you can use that.
Yeah, Hacks. I think Hacks said it perfectly in a tweet when we were having like kind of an open discussion that this kind of all could be solved, whether you find that satisfying or not, with like using the mapping of the consciousness, kind of like it's Bernard, you know what I mean? But then I think Hacks said something about grabbing a strand of DNA and they could complete this. You want to elaborate on that, Hacks? I know I'm paraphrasing you, but I thought it was clever. I know that none of us thought it would be the best way for them to go about doing it, but I believe it's possible. It might be the way they're going.
Yeah, I think for Arnold to be that little module, the writers would just have to include a line about how exactly that he preserved a thing of DNA for this time, and then again when the technology came to, they created it.
Yeah, not the most satisfying, but again, it works. It does work.
Sure. So I think it can within the reality that we've been given, it can do. So I accept the challenge that this was before they had the technology, but as Hack said, you just need one line of dialogue to clarify that that's what could happen.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, is there anything else from before we move to having a think about episode 5, which is now just under 3 hours away? Anything else you want to wrap up on episode 4?
Good on this end.
Yeah, I just that it was the most beautifully shot, the best shot, the best episode so far of all the seasons, in my opinion. It even beats out the By Criminal Mind from season 1. It was just so well done. Like you said, it's hard to believe it was Lisa Joy's first time, but she's had plenty of time to sit back and watch. She sandbagged it just like Ford sandbagged it.
Excellent. Okay, well let's look forward then to next episode. Next episode, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the other two guys because we did talk about this. None of us are going to try and attempt to pronounce the Japanese name for this one, so we would probably mangle it beyond belief. But this is very clearly set in what we know as being called Shogun World. Hacks, I know you reminded yourself just before we went live about what was in the trailer for episode 5. Do you want to just give us a quick rundown of what to expect to see?
Yeah. So again, it's going to be a very Japanese subtitled episode. The entire thing being in this culture. There's some kind of samurai aspect. I believe there's actually opposing samurai factions that they're going to see as well. There's some kind of duality between, in the very first scene where she talks about coming to the new world. That was a line that Maeve had in the first season, and it was something that she was programmed. So what I believe it attests to is that all the parks have kind of like this same society structure. They all have like a bar in which all the barmaids say, some kind of enticing thing like going to the new world and being whoever you want to be. So I think that Maeve is gonna kind of use this and relate and try to sway other hosts to her party. And really, it's kind of a 180 from where Maeve needs to be. This entire episode is kind of her going away from her goal.
Agreed. Anything you want to add to this one, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, like the line of dialogue, like I brought up before, and Hax just mentioned, is definitely important to remember that, it is the same line of dialogue about finding this new world and finding her voice, that she's kind of recycling. I think that maybe we'll get a little bit better of an idea of who's in control of Samurai World, if there is this like heavy degree of separation, like I'm proposing, between Westworld and the other worlds. Like, does Lee Sizemore like right for this world? Because that really wouldn't make sense from a writer's point of view for somebody that is only only knowledgeable in Western culture to be writing for a Japanese storyline. So it'll be interesting to see the degree of separation with the behind the scenes, what they put into it, and if there's the dualities of like, because Hax brings up a good point. There's always, it's in different forms, geishas versus the brothels, and everybody goes to work, everybody has their wars, everybody fights, everybody has a drink, but it's just kind of like a different setting for it. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, what Maeve is doing, if you use the allegory of the cave, is she is choosing to chase the shadow. She is chasing the shadows in the cave, her daughter. And that's where that comes into play. It's like, well, what's the validity of that? Are we seeing her just not accepting to be enlightened? Or does the love for her daughter just trump that? Because that's the argument. It's like, what's better about how we perceive things than other people? So I think they're just kind of going along with that theme. And, she's chasing shadows right now. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's going to be interesting to see how the hosts react to her in the degree of separation. I think that's what we'll get out of this episode. I think this will be a lot of fan service. We'll get a lot of cool action scenes as far as like understanding where the story's going from here, except for Maeve's storyline being kind of isolated as it's been. I don't think we'll get a large progression in the plot overall, but I think it's going to be very exciting and a very fun episode to try to talk about after immediately. So we'll just hope to not come off ignorant with the names. But I think it's going to be exciting as far as plot progression. I don't think we'll too much out of this episode.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I think it's very clear that this is going to be focused largely on Maeve's storyline. There is going to be a bit about Dolores at least, and we'll come on to that in just 1 second. But to focus in on Maeve, then what seems to be happening is that at the end of the episode before last, episode 3, she ends up that her and her new gang that she's now gathered together, there's half a dozen of them now, and they go up to the surface, and it's clear Lee Sizemore is saying that he says they're up there in Klondike land or whatever he called it, implication being this is part of Westworld now, but they run into what appears to be a samurai running at them with a katana. Now it's not clear whether this is Lee, he seemed to say when he was below ground that he got a bit lost, he didn't know where they were, so it's not clear whether he actually did just bring them up in completely the wrong park, or they came up in the right park and a little bit of Shogun World has kind of bled over into Westworld. Either way, what seems to happen is they get captured. You can see it in the trailer that the lot of them they're all tied up and they get taken into Shogun World proper. And this is, as Hax was saying, this is taking Maeve away from what her mission is. So basically, right from the start of episode 1 of this season, she was there, right, I'm going to go try and find my daughter. Heading off, episode 5, she's now in a completely different park, and she's being captured. And so what we're going to see fundamentally is her trying to get out of whatever predicament she's in and back into Westworld to try and find her daughter. But the bigger question, I think, here is, and Justin, you alluded to this as well, is what's the situation there? We saw in the Raj world, we saw that they also seemed to be in the same kind of thing seemed to be happening. They were there quoting the same kind of these violent delights have violent ends. They just instantly that all the hosts seem to be freed from their narratives. The question is, was that just those two worlds, or is it also this third world that we know about, or Park number 2, as it probably should be called? What's going on there? How are they also off the leash? I think the implication is that they are, and perhaps what we're seeing is her getting caught up in these different hosts who have been released from their narrative and trying to figure out what's going on, and she needs to work out how she deals with that. And does she have the same control that she had in Westworld over all of the hosts over in Shogun World? Is it the same thing she's got going on there? Is there anything else you want to pick up on, Hacks, on Maeve and where Maeve might be going in this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit it on the head there. They do definitely get captured. They're moved to this Shogun World, and someone in the chat asked a question about possibly this being intentional. So we know that her daughter is actually in Westworld, in Park 1, again being Westworld. So for them to go to this other park, and there's a brief scene in the trailer where they are being tied up against their will, or already tied against their will. So I don't think it's intentional. I think what's going to come from it, though, is a lot of good. I think that some of the characters they have and some of the people they have, some of the main actors they have for these positions, I think they're going to be reoccurring characters. So again, expanding her team and being a force for good.
Yeah, I think that, out of everything, out of all the timelines we're seeing, at least we know with Maeve's, I think it's fair to say we can trust that timeline the most. Yeah, like that is like the one static timeline. Like we can even though it might not have as many answers as the rest could have, obviously, because it's Westworld, but we can trust this timeline more. And like I always do use that allegory of the cave. She is in the shadows trying to enlighten the others. So I see her popping up here by accident as a way for her to try to enlighten the others and spread enlightenment through the park on her journey to find her daughter, which she will have her own little situation with that. But yeah, I think that it's serving a purpose, and I completely agree that these characters, they didn't hire glorified extras. They hired people that cost money. So if you look at it from production standpoint, they're going to play a role. So she's there to enlighten and bring some people out of the shadows, but then she's going to have to face, she's still chasing the shadows technically, if that makes sense. So yeah, I agree. And it's going to show us a lot about the geographics of the geography of the park, boundaries and whatnot, and the degree of separation. Like I said, exciting. It'll be exciting.
It will. And I think just to throw in something which may or may not happen in this episode, but just a random thought. The pre-season trailer had a shot of what looked like Maeve, who had been killed and was then needing to be being brought back, lying down with lots of wounds and blood and things like that. So that will happen at some point. Whether it happens this episode or another episode, I don't know. But do not think that just because Maeve has got all of these talents and powers, and incidentally, she seems to be able to speak Japanese as well, which is probably quite useful given where she's gone. But do not think that she is bulletproof. She isn't. There may well be a time when she gets hurt, and if she's vulnerable anywhere, one would suspect it's in one of the different parks rather than Westworld. Guys, so I think we're starting to come to an end here. If there are any extra questions, just drop them in the chat. We'll come to pick out both of you, Justin and Hacks. If you want to pick out if there are any particular questions you saw there in the chat you want us to cover off, then please do that. But I just want to also mention that this isn't just going to be about Maeve, this episode. This is also going to be a bit about Dolores. We saw Dolores there. We may not see so much of the Bernard and Elsie team. We may not see so much of the Man in Black, but we definitely will see some of Dolores. And if you remember, it was slightly throwaway, but she is now heading to Sweetwater. She's now heading back to that town, which is where all of the guests arrived first, when they first arrived at at Westworld. She's going back there. Now, the question is why she's going back there. Now, my theory, and guys, maybe you can pick up on this and have your own theories to this. I do wonder whether that is because that she knows that's where the train comes in to bring people in. Therefore, that is the obvious way of tracing back how you get into the Mesa hub, how you actually get into the heart of the Delos organization by following that train line. But guys, have you got any other thoughts on, assuming we see her get to Sweetwater, why she might want to be going there?
Yeah, I think originally a lot of people pointed out that it could be the picture of Juliet from the New York cityscape. I don't know the purpose of it. The context of the conversation, it does sound like it's an item, right? But the next thing that I came to was potentially the train. It's really the only substantial thing in that can be used for anything. But I also came to the theory that maybe it was Dolores's mother, because right before this, she has a very touching scene with her father, and she kind of relates to, or well, she kind of publishes that she can't really relate to anybody. There's no one awakened yet. There's no one really experiencing what she's experiencing. So I think that potentially she could be getting her mother, so that she can kind of use that to get Peter Abernathy, her, a loving narrative of hers, to be her father once again.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's, she's chasing the shadows in a way by going back. She's looking for her father. She is, looking, and it's a good point that Hacks brought up. Her mother is in this series, but she's never really shown. Like they do, the narrative is like they raid the Abernathy farm, and the mother and father are killed, and blah blah blah. Teddy's either with her or not. I have a whole breakdown of how that works, but the mother's not really shown as much. But yeah, she is like chasing a little bit of shadows, and like you said, everybody is not as involved as her because she's coming back and they think she's just kind of like off. They're not connecting the way that she wants. She's upset that Teddy doesn't recognize her father. So I think the train is a reason. I think there is like her strategy, her bigger picture, the strategy that she's going for. She knows she has to do something. She knows she has to go to whatever she sees as a weapon, the Valley Beyond. But I think that she is kind of getting sidetracked, as Maeve is getting sidetracked, chasing shadows, chasing after her father in the relationship, because that's really bothersome to her when she sees Teddy not recognize her father. You know what I mean? So I agree with you guys. I think there's a little bit of strategy there, but I think that her personal feelings are kind of overcoming, even the enlightenment that she's gone through. She still yearns for her father. Like she says in season 1, why would I want to forget them? The pain is all I have, of them. So she still values that.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, let's just dip into the comments a little bit. There's been some great chat. We've been following it as it goes through. Hacks, was there anything that you spotted there in the chat that you think it would be good to us to have a quick chat about?
I can't find the question now, but someone did bring up in the trailer how one of the scenes showed kind of like uniformed men on the ground in like a snowy Everglade kind of scape, and they actually show that they're mechanical hosts, that they're older model hosts. And I think that this really just means that across all parks they kind of had their central storage or their individual mesas or however it's set up, that just all of the cold storage across all of the parks kind of let loose at that point.
Sure. I mean, I think that's it's quite clear that the hosts improved over time, but they didn't replace all of the hosts all the time. There were various iterations of hosts, and in Westworld, some of them were the really old ones, and they just got, so Dolores got upgraded again and again over time, but some of them were old models that were kept in because Ford wanted them kept in. Some of them were completely new ones. So there are lots of different levels of hosts out there, and I think we touched on it earlier on, but the one of the points that we need to understand here, because we do not know, there's so much we still don't know about how the organization works. The extent to which Ford was in control of what happened in other worlds, he seemed so focused in on Westworld. Clearly, it was his technology which was being used in the other worlds. But are there going to be other sort of equivalents of like Maeve or Dolores in these other worlds? Are there people that Ford or Arnold before that had been focusing in on as being the Judas Steer, the host who would be able to help lead the other hosts, or are we expecting Maeve to go in there and do this? So I think there's an awful lot that we still have to learn. Justin, were there any particular comments that you wanted to pick up on in the chat?
No, I think that it's really interesting, the idea that, you know, there's different versions of Maeve and Dolores. If you look at it just from how you would have to make this park work, you know, it's very hard to. It's been brought up before that these are all copies of real people, because it'd be so difficult for the artists, you know, that make these hosts to make these genuine like creations that are lifelike, you know, without using some type of inspiration from the real world. So are we going to see different, you know, iterations of them in these other parks, whether it be physical or, you know, with their emotions and whatnot? So you could have a multicultural, you know, like span that they'd be worldly if you mix them all together. I think that's a really interesting prospect. And you know, like, if these, even they might not physically look the same even, but are they sharing the same traits? And also, is Dolores the Judas Steer? You know, it does seem like to a point that she's definitely the Judas Steer with a lot of the Westworld hosts. And how much control did Anthony Hopkins, Dr. Ford have over the other parks? You know, Westworld season 1 is, you know, that's their only focus. They're never talking about these other parks. So is there other writers? Is there other creators, other behavioral techs other than what we know? I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely will. And just to pick on something Jeff Bust said, hi, Jeff, good to see you. Talking about, sorry, I've completely lost. So it was Akane, again, probably butchered the pronunciation there. One of the characters in Shogun World seems to be, from what we saw of the trailer, seems to have been getting dreams about being free and the rest. So there is a hint that perhaps, yes, we are going to get characters in Shogun World who are not just freed from their narratives and let loose to do what they want, but are there on the first real step to be gaining this self-awareness and self-consciousness. Okay, guys, I think what we're going to do now is we're coming up to 1:30. So I think we're going to start to wrap this one up now. Guys, let's just quickly go over to you both. Let's go first to Justin. Do you want to say where people can find you on the net if they're looking for you?
Yeah, make sure to go to the Justin Thomas Show and subscribe. I have I try to take a different perspective, a different look at Westworld, and switch it up. I try to be a little bit different, and I hope you enjoy my videos. And always make sure to check into at 10:30 after the dust settles, or before the dust settles. After the dust settles would be maybe a future production we'll do. Before the dust settles with me, Hax Dogma, and special guest tonight, AU Pack Mule will be joining the trio, and it'll be really interesting. Get our initial thoughts and join in on the conversation. We work with you guys, and you get to see us trying to work out things in our brains before our perfectly fleshed out videos come out. So yeah, definitely check me out, and thank you again, Robert, for having me on. Absolute pleasure.
Hax, how about you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, hey, I'm Hax Dogma. You can find me at Hax Dogma on YouTube, Twitter. If you go to any of my YouTube videos, you can also join the Discord channel, in which we have audio discussions with people at times. And yeah, just overall, if you want to check out additional Westworld content, be sure to leave a like and subscribe.
Fantastic. And guys, you know my channel. If you want to follow me on other social media, I'm In Deep Geek on Twitter, In Deep Geek on Facebook, In Deep Geek Official on Instagram. So please do check me out there. If you like my Westworld content and are interested in Game of Thrones as well, please do have a look for my Game of Thrones content. And patrons, there are some things to be checking out. There's the Varys video that you were asking for. What was it that he heard in the flames? And there's the for exclusive for my patrons, my audio narration from the pre-release chapters from The Winds of Winter by George R.R. Martin. That's coming out also later this week. Keep an eye out on Thursday for my Game of Thrones live stream, where I'm going to be announcing what my my new project is going to be. I'm really looking forward to that, so keep an eye out for that. But I just want to say thank you for everyone in the chat. It's been great seeing you there. Been some really good conversation going on. Particular thanks for the super chats. That's incredibly generous. And guys, I'm really looking forward to the episode. Do enjoy it. Please do check out Before the Dust Settles with these two wonderful guys after that airs. And I will see you here again, same time next week. Take care, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.